All right, Broncos. Things are starting to heat up around the NFL, and the Denver Broncos may have just been handed a golden opportunity that nobody saw coming. We all know that championship teams don't just win games. They also know how to take advantage of opportunities when they appear. And honestly, this could be one of those moments that ends up changing the course of an entire season. I really want to see the Broncos competing for a Super Bowl. That's the dream every fan has. And why can't this be the year? Now I want to hear from you. If the Carolina Panthers called Denver today looking for an edge rusher, would you make a trade? Or would you keep this talented pass rushing group together and make one final push for a championship? Let me know your opinion down in the comments because I really want to hear what Broncos country thinks. And if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 15 years, smash that like button as hard as you can. But only do it if you truly believe in this team. And if you're confident the Broncos are heading in the right direction, type this in the comments. Go Broncos! We're going to the Super Bowl. Now, let's dive into why this opportunity suddenly appeared and how the Broncos could be in the perfect position to take advantage of it. The biggest reason this conversation even exists is because the Carolina Panthers suddenly found themselves in a very difficult position. One of their young edge rushers, Nick Scourton, who entered the season with high expectations after recording 5 sacks during his rookie year, suffered a torn ACL shortly after training camp began. That injury ends his season before it even had a chance to get started, leaving Carolina searching for answers at one of the most important defensive positions. This situation becomes even more interesting when you consider everything the Panthers already invested during the offseason. They made aggressive moves because they are clearly trying to compete now. Losing an important young pass rusher was never part of the plan, and replacing that kind of production is much easier said than done. Teams chasing wins don't usually wait around hoping someone develops. They often look outside the building, and that's where Denver could enter the conversation. If there is one position where the Broncos have incredible depth, it's edge rusher. Last season, Denver's defense was producing sacks at an incredible pace. The group looked capable of threatening league records before injuries and the natural ups and downs of a long season slowed things down. Even so, this remains one of the strongest units on the entire roster, and several talented players could find themselves battling simply to earn playing time. That creates an interesting question. If another team suddenly becomes desperate, should Denver consider moving one of its edge rushers in exchange for valuable draft capital? There are several reasons why communication between these organizations could happen. Sean Payton has plenty of familiarity with this division from his years coaching in the NFC South. There is mutual respect between him and Carolina's ownership, making conversations much easier than they might be between other organizations. In addition, Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero spent years with the Broncos organization and knows many people inside the building. He understands the type of players Denver values and already has relationships with members of this roster. Those connections don't guarantee anything happens, but they certainly make a phone call much more realistic. Now let's look at the Broncos players one by one. The easiest decision involves Nick Bonitto. There simply isn't a realistic conversation here. Bonitto has become one of the premier pass rushers on the defense, and moving him would create a massive hole that no draft pick could immediately replace. Unless someone presented an absolutely unbelievable package, there isn't much reason for Denver to even consider the possibility. His impact on the field makes him one of the least movable players on the roster. Jonathan Cooper falls into a similar category. Beyond his production, Cooper provides leadership inside the locker room and has consistently proven himself as an important part of Denver's defense. His contract has also been viewed as a team-friendly deal, giving the Broncos excellent value. Even with outside discussion surrounding him, there is every indication that Denver continues believing in him. From a football standpoint alone, his value to this defense makes trading him extremely difficult to justify. Then comes Jonah Ellis. This situation is a little different because timing matters. Ellis showed exciting potential early in his career before dealing with injuries. That means another team might not currently value him as highly as Denver does. Trading a young player while his value is potentially lower rarely makes sense. Unless another organization dramatically overpays, keeping Ellis appears to be the smarter decision, especially considering how important depth becomes throughout a long NFL season. The conversation becomes much more interesting with Dondria Tillman. Denver discovered an outstanding contributor after bringing him into the organization, and he quickly rewarded that opportunity with impressive production. Finding players like that is never easy. However, contract situations eventually become part of every roster decision. If another team became willing to offer significant draft compensation, Denver would at least have to think about the long-term picture. It wouldn't be an easy move because his role within the pass rush rotation has become valuable, but this is where realistic discussions could begin. Q Robinson represents another player whose future could be even brighter than what we've already seen. His opportunities have been limited, but flashes of talent have already appeared. That creates an interesting dilemma because teams outside Denver may not yet appreciate how high his ceiling could become. Selling too early often means giving away future production before everyone else recognizes it. Unless someone values him far beyond his current resume, keeping Robinson appears to offer much greater long-term benefits. Now we arrive at perhaps the most fascinating name on the entire list. Drew Sanders. This is where things become genuinely complicated. Coming out of college, Sanders was viewed by many evaluators as one of the most talented defensive prospects available. His athletic ability allowed him to line up in multiple positions, whether rushing the passer or playing inside linebacker. That versatility created enormous excitement around his future. Since arriving in Denver, however, the depth chart has become incredibly crowded. The Broncos simply have so many talented edge defenders that earning one of the final roster spots could become a real challenge. That doesn't mean Sanders lacks talent. In fact, many still believe his upside remains extremely high. The question is whether another organization values that upside enough to offer meaningful compensation before Denver faces difficult roster decisions. This is where Giro Evero's familiarity with the Broncos organization becomes especially interesting. Even if he wasn't directly involved with Sanders after the draft, he understands how Denver evaluates defensive talent and knows the people making those decisions. A player with Sanders' physical tools could become especially attractive to a team suddenly needing pass rushing help. If Carolina became willing to part with valuable draft capital, perhaps a mid-round selection with conditions that improve based on playing time or availability, Denver might seriously listen. Not because Sanders lacks ability. Quite the opposite. Precisely because another team may believe his opportunity simply hasn't arrived yet. That makes him one of the most logical names in this entire discussion. Another intriguing possibility is Johnny Walker Jr. As an undrafted player, he entered Denver facing an uphill battle from the beginning. Yet he possesses traits the Broncos clearly value at the position. The challenge isn't necessarily talent. It's opportunity. With so much competition already ahead of him, making the final roster could become extremely difficult. That reality changes the equation. If another organization believes Walker deserves a chance on its active roster and offers draft compensation, Denver may receive value for a player who otherwise faces uncertain roster odds. Rather than risking losing depth without compensation later, turning that situation into future draft assets becomes an understandable strategy. Then there's Deshaun McCullough. This is one player who continues generating excitement because of his potential. While he may not receive the same attention as some bigger names, there is clear belief that he could eventually develop into an important contributor. Sometimes the smartest move isn't chasing immediate value but waiting for talent to fully emerge. If Denver believes McCullough is on that path, keeping him becomes the obvious decision. Stepping back and looking at the entire picture, this isn't really about trying to weaken the Broncos' defense. It's about recognizing something every successful organization understands. Depth creates options.